a little bit about yourself and your journey to medicine?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on the show, and I'm really happy to be offering my value here. So I grew up on the cusp of Gen X and millennials, and from an early age, I was always the outsider in my school and my community, and I never fit in. So my MO growing up was always to find ways and means of differentiating myself and thinking outside the box. And I've honed that entrepreneurial skill set that I've used to this day. Um, for me, the ultimate goal out of all of this was freedom. So, whether it was getting paid as a surgeon as or as an investor, it was all about freedom. So medicine was the means to an end. And having a high paying career was great, but like I said, for me it was always about financial freedom, not having to depend upon a job, boss, corporation, social security, pensions, and things of that nature. So I went to Baylor for medical school. My first choice was part of the MD PhD program. Got my PhD in bioengineering, and I have to tell you that the my PhD, those 4 years were the best 4 years of my entire life. And it was at Rice was a the place for where the buckyball was discovered, and it was a huge center for nanotechnology. And from there, spurned a huge entrepreneurial tech and scientific hub. So I immersed myself with a lot of really smart, innovative ideas and individuals. Got to sit in on a lot of MBA courses, and that's where I started my two companies. One was investing in stocks, and later was investing in real estate. And so by the age of 29, that was my final year of medical school, I was able to generate a full time 6 figure income without needing to work for anybody or depend upon anybody. And I was essentially able to generate a sustainable, viable business on my own. Like I said, that was my final year of medical school, and a lot of my mentors, I was strongly encouraged to go the traditional route. So rather than pursue my true passions, I settled on orthopedic surgery. I matched into ortho in 2007 at Rutgers. Um, During that time, I wasn't really happy or fulfilled, and quite frankly, I was quite bored. So in 2008, I took a leap of faith and became a full time entrepreneur. Looking back, it was a huge gamble, but it was calculated and strategic. I had a plan B and C, and it paid off huge in terms of time, monetary, and economic freedom. So from 2008 to 2016, became a millionaire in my mid 30s. Took a year off to travel the world, reassess life, and then started my consulting company in 2017. And that's where I do a lot of digital advising, a lot of content creation, a lot of group coaching, online courses. So the ways and means of providing and offering value are quite varied and different, but the underlying mission is to promote financial literacy and awareness among physicians. So I've spoken at Seek back in 2018. I spoke at Leverage and Growth Summit for Passive Income MD Peter Kim's last year, and I'm speaking at White Coat Investors, the summit this year, and I've written numerous articles for Kevin MD. So I'm very active both in content creation as well as coaching, speaking, and serving a broader audience. Um,
Wow, that was a lot. I think that we could probably talk for hours about each of those. But I do want to ask you one particular question. You said that your PhD years were some of the best years where you explored a lot of interests during your medical school journey. And honestly, I think with this podcast,
uh huh.
you may be the first MD PhD that I've interviewed. So
Yeah.
can you tell the students who may be listening a little bit about the how the MD PhD process was? And I think you kind of hit on why it was very important to you, but we can chat a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So the MD PhD program was something developed by the NIH, and it was basically to churn out a lot of leaders in academia. So the idea was to basically, so you do your first 2 years of medical school. That gives you a clinical basis for you to bring clinical questions into the lab. You do a rigorous PhD, and then by the time you finish your medical school, you go into residency. And like I said, the idea was to train academic scientists, so those who would make advances in the field of science, so that you could make advances in the field of medicine. So I think the idea is noble, but I think the system itself, the actual practice of medicine, is so broken that it's really hard to combine the two. The idea is noble, the idea is great. I just think the practicality of doing a MD and PhD are just not very feasible. So what happens is usually people end up doing a medical and a little bit of graduate, or they end up doing full-time research, and for me, I became a full-time entrepreneur. So like I said, but nevertheless, I wouldn't I would do it again in a heartbeat, because like I said, it gave me a lot of skill sets in terms of just scientific innovation, creativity. It was, like I said, those 7 years at Baylor and Rice were the best 7 years of my life. I had a lot of intellectual, creative freedom to pursue what I wanted to do. So, and like I said, I took a look at your webpage and your podcast, and any students that are interested in pursuing an MD, PhD are feel free to contact me and that sort of thing. But like I said, with and also it opens a lot of doors in terms of future potential careers. So I'm a coach, I'm a consultant. I do a lot of investing, and a lot of my work now is geared towards more of the financial technology sector. So there's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's actually there's a lot of things that you can do with an MD, PhD.
I think that you brought up really great points, especially like how you're a jack of all trades. And I think that you also mentioned earlier how you had certain mentors through the process of medical school who kind of encourage you to become a clinical physician, in which you're an orthopedist.
Right,
But you knew early on that you wanted to explore other things, and
right.
you kind of did some self searching and seeking and tried to figure out, like, I have these, what you're talking about seems like soft skills. Like, you learn a lot of things about leadership and innovation and all of the other things that you mentioned during your training,
Uh-huh.
that a lot of people, I think, who are early in their career, who may be wondering what they want to do next, or if they want to add a side hustle, or even not pursue and do clinical medicine,
Mm-hmm.
what skills do they have? Like, I know when I was in that process, a lot of my friends who were thinking about other things were like, well, I've been in medicine my whole life, and I was a bio major and all of that. I
Mm-hmm.
probably couldn't even do anything like get a position at Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
But what you I love that you talked about, like, all of the skills that you do have and how you can apply them to other fields.
Right. Yeah, I actually think that it's I think the dilemma, I'll call it a dilemma of being a physician, because when you when you tell people you're a medical student, you're a physician, people automatically think that you're going to work in a hospital or work in private practice or do surgeries or procedures, internist, things of that nature. But actually, and I think the actual system, promotes that, because medical schools are actually rated based on their match rate, and how many of their graduates go on to into res. That's almost the sole criterion by which medical schools are evaluated. But like I said, and then it sort of pigeonholes a lot of physicians into just pursuing the clinical route. And I think increasingly there's a lot more physicians who have other interests, and who break outside the mold. But like I said, the culture is more geared towards pushing you into a clinical field, and it's actually has its merits, because if you because basically you get into a residency and fellowship, and then you're able to practice and generate an income. So
Mm-hmm.
but if you don't do that, you're sort of left on your own to find ways and means of generating income. So, and but like I said, times are changing. There's a lot more different opportunities out there. I think people are becoming more aware of it. I think the social stigma of not practicing is is slowly fading away. But again, it's going to take time. A lot of it's a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that physicians, they think that it's both a mindset where they feel that if they don't practice medicine, that that their education and training were a waste, or they were a failure. And that's actually that's part of it's like a social stigma.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, you really there are unlimited number of options. And like and so I said, just if you're interested in different fields, go ahead and reach out to me.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier a couple of different conferences that you've spoken about non-clinical careers, and one of them you mentioned was Seek.
Uh-huh.
I don't necessarily know if the listeners are familiar with that.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell them a little bit about the Seek program?
Yeah, it's actually a program. It's actually it's interesting. It's a conference, a yearly conference in Chicago in or it's late mid October. But it's actually grown. It started back in 2015, but it's actually grown to each year it brings almost over 1,000 physicians now. and it
Mm.
and it basically brings physicians in various different fields. So you can have a physician writer, a physician consultant, um, physician investors, and it's there to essentially network, but also to give physicians different ideas about how they can best use their medical degree outside of just the traditional clinical practice. So that's one. It's There's another one I'm going to be speaking at, is the white coat investor, um, which is later on early this year. So like I said, technology has changed so much that it's so much easier to be able to find information, to find groups of people that who resonate with you and who can help you along your path in your journey.
Yes, that's amazing. And you mentioned that you also do some coaching as well as everything else that you mentioned, being an entrepreneur and an investor and a keynote speaker and dealing with health technology. Like, I'm at the point where I'm like, what is it that you don't do?
Yeah.
But can we talk about any specific things that you coach about?
Yeah, mainly I basically coach. So I coach physicians that are looking to transition. So they're planning their career transitions, and I coach physician entrepreneurs. So those that already have their idea, that already have their business plan. They're already able to generate cash flow, sales, revenue. So I'd have those two, but mainly my means to financial freedom were through stocks, through real estate, and options. So those three. And then once I got my financial freedom, that allowed me to pursue pretty much whatever path I wanted to. So I've written 4 books. I do a lot of speaking, consulting. So I gear my material and my content towards those different income streams. So last year, with the pandemic, I leveraged technology, webinars, Zooms, and hosted both webinars, uh, workshops, and mastermind groups, and essentially helping cohorts in a large number of physicians. I was able to help them with their career transitions and their issues on a greater and larger scale.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking about that, like you mentioned, even in medical school when you were doing your MD PhD, you were reaching out and working and being an entrepreneur and expanding businesses, and financial freedom is very important to you and a passion of yours, as you've written 4 books and, like you said, hosted online courses and also lead a Facebook group geared towards financial freedom for physicians.
Uh huh.
So what is the best advice that you would give those that are early in their career, either in the pre-med era or currently in school or early in their career,
Uh huh.
to help them set themselves up for success
Mm.
and kind of push towards that financial freedom.
Yeah. So one thing, my main recommendation is, besides the medical, I'll talk about the medical side a little bit later. But in terms
Hmm.
of the financial freedom, uh, what I did was I started out with three books. One was the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That's I still read that to this day. I go through it several times each year, always getting new insights, and that's the best personal development book for anybody in terms of they want success in their careers, finance, business, relationships, health, you name it. It gives you all the principles. So I always read something outside of medicine, and it was always related to business, personal finance, or personal development. I also recommend starting off reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, because I think with with the culture of medicine we're indoctrinated into a lot of principles that are gradually evolving from industrial to the information age ideas, and so a lot of ideas and ideals that we subscribe to these days clash with those of the industrial age. So read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it'll teach you the different sectors between being an entrepreneur, investor versus being an employee. So that'll teach you how to actually get your financial freedom. So really, and then Creating Wealth by Robert Allen. Multiple streams of income is really key because these days, as a physician, you can no longer rely on one source of earned income. So, for
Hmm.
example, as a physician, you're earning, high six figures, and if your entire livelihood and your family is dependent on those that six-figure income, if you lose that, it can be very catastrophic and devastating, as we saw last year. So really start to look into alternative streams of income, especially passive income, because passive income are the streams of income that do not require you to go into work for someone else for a paycheck. So those books. Within medicine, I strongly recommend you watch your student debt levels. Don't get them. Don't overtake too much debt that you can't handle. I've heard recently outrageous figures. One student was like 700, $800,000 in debt. Married with two kids. Wanting to buy a house during residency. So manage student debt wisely and smartly. And then apart from that, make sure you understand that the culture of medicine, the practice of medicine, and the business of medicine is really changing. So how are you going to adapt to those changes while maintaining, your clinical skill set? So, those are my recommendations. And again, contact me if you have even further questions. I'll be happy to answer them for you.
That's awesome. A lot of people mention a lot of those resources, and I think that it's very important to do your reading, do your research, talk to others. Like there are Facebook groups out there that definitely weren't out there when we were in school.
Exactly.
There's all of this social media and Instagram and
uh-huh.
LinkedIn and places to learn through
Yeah.
blogs and YouTubes and things. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, you definitely mentioned a good thing about making wise choices. Medical education is very expensive,
Yeah.
and everyone doesn't have certain luxuries of having things paid for. But maybe you should go to a state school, or maybe you should stay on campus instead of
Uh-huh.
getting a two-bedroom apartment or something like that in an expensive city, or maybe going to a less expensive city if you guys are in that process of figuring out where you want to go. And then after that, making more wise decisions about during residency and after residency, like still living like a student, still living like a resident, and
Uh-huh.
figuring out that plan to
Uh-huh.
help you pay down things, or even other things like you mentioned in terms of where life is happening. And sometimes of course we don't have control over everything, so
Mhm.
as we've seen in the past year in 2020, some physician salaries were decreased, or some people were laid off, or some people became very ill and they could not work and they were the breadwinners of the family. So looking into other things like side streams of income and disability insurance and things like that will definitely be of help.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's really interesting because coaching physicians and the actual practice of good financial habits has nothing to do with your IQ, what undergraduate, what medical school, what residency, what fellowship. Has nothing to do. It just has to do with making wise financial decisions. A lot of it's common sense, but a lot of it can be a little bit more sophisticated and advanced. But like I said, you could be the smartest physician out there, but you can really fail miserably at finances. So it's a totally different skill set. But the good thing is that it's an easier skill set to learn than actually becoming a doctor. So, like if you can get through medical school residency, you can learn these wise financial habits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you have special people who are talking to you, like Dr. Lou, who is basically asking you to reach out to him and he can coach you and lead you in the right direction. So we'll definitely get his contact information for you and we'll say it during the show and then we'll also post it on the link to our podcast so you'll know where to go.
Excellent.
We kind of touched on it throughout your journey,
Uh huh.
but I want to dive back into it because I find like it's a connection that we have where we're both working in technology, and right now I'm doing non-traditional patient care, but it's not in person.
Uh huh.
And sometimes, like we said, we have these mentors who, when they went into medical school, they just, when you go into school, you think, okay, I'm going to do whatever I choose for my specialty for the next 30 years. But life happens. And like you said, you did some soul searching and figured out what was best for you. So you're an orthopedist who retired before the age of 40.
Yeah.
Do you miss surgery at all?
I actually, that's a great question. Don't actually miss the practice of surgery. What actually, being an orthopedic surgeon really taught me was the how cruel the corporate world is, but
Mm-hmm.
and then and also the fact that I'm more of an entrepreneur, creative, and investor, so I don't really fit into that corporate model. So the actual practice of getting into orthopedics and doing that taught me a lot of skill sets in terms of just basic goal setting and how to be successful. The actual practice of surgery actually taught me how to manage risk very well. So so when I'm investing in real estate stocks, when I'm evaluating a hire, I'm always looking at what is the downside and how can I protect myself from the downside. If I can protect myself from the downside, then the upside is I can actually, I won't lose. I can only gain more. So the uh, the other thing about it is that I've learned that really I function better as an entrepreneur and creative, and so that's where I've really focused and come to accept myself and hone my skill sets as an entrepreneur and investor. Lastly, being an entrepreneur investor has allowed me to leverage my time much more efficiently and effective. So, as a surgeon, you're getting paid, 1,000, plus per hour, but as an entrepreneur and investor, you can leverage people, money, assets, time, and resources so that you work less, spend less energy, but you can actually leverage your time much more. So that's something I've really learned, is the value of time. So we all have 24 hours in a day. Our time attention is capped, but if we can learn to multiply our time through passive income streams, such as what Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos are doing, Elon Musk, then we can be that much more effective and we can reach much more people and have a greater impact on the world.
That's awesome. Yes, and I think you brought a great point about you figuring out what your values are. So you value time, and you obviously have a spirit of wanting to help others since you went into medicine. You're just doing it in a different way. So you said that now with you managing your time well and figuring out how to delegate and using all of the soft skills that we talked about, you're able to reach even more people and make a greater impact on just instead of just that one patient, and even through your coaching and your mentoring and all of the other endeavors that you're having to help other physicians in the same boat, because you could have just went off and said, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and just do things for myself, but you decided to come back and also teach others the way. So you're helping even a broader spectrum of people through others. So I really commend that, and I think that that is amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's actually, what I recommend, for your listeners and your audience is that, if you're passionate about medicine, then do medicine because you're passionate about it and you care about patients and you want to participate in patient care. Um, don't do medicine because of you think it's gonna provide a stable income, or it's gonna make your parents or your spouse, or your, or you fit into this mold or societal mold where you're supposed to fit into some sort of preconceived notion. So just do it because you love it rather than do it because you have to do it.
I couldn't say it any other way. I think that that is something where a lot of what we call, and you mentioned it earlier, like kind of regrettingly, like me too, millennial doctors are experiencing right now in terms of figuring out, like I said, everybody isn't like it was when our mentors were in medical school, where you got one job, you did it for 30 years.
uh,
Even if you decide to continue to practice clinical medicine, some people switch jobs and some people decide to do something else or try another specialty or something. So listen to what you want to do and not what others want for yourself.
exactly.
Yes. And my final question for you is, what is the best piece of advice that you'd like to leave those early in their journeys of medicine?
um like really focus on financial literacy at an early age, spend that time, and that'll set yourself up for success in the future, whether or not you want to be. So you don't have to, like, financial freedom, you can do it by working your 9 to 5 and saving 20% of your earned income and letting it grow. So that's, if you want to retire early or achieve financial freedom much earlier, it's going to take a lot more education and skill set. But really focus on financial literacy at an early age, and that'll allow you the options and the freedom to be able to choose what you want to do with your life. And then the second thing is do something not because of a preconceived notion, but do it because you are passionate about it. Like I said, these days you have there's so many opportunities. It's unlimited. So really, there's no short of options or opportunities. What's really limiting is fear and also procrastination. And really, I think in the end, it's not going to be a fear of failure, but it's going to be a fear of regret of not going after your dreams or making that choice.
That's awesome. And you graciously offered for our listeners to reach out to you if they have any additional questions or want to look into any of your endeavors or courses and things like that. So how can people reach you?
Oh, so you can find me on you can what my email is Christopher Lou Loo MD PhD at gmail.com. So you can reach out to me that way. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter, at Dr. Chris Lou MD PhD. You can also Google my name in YouTube, and I have a YouTube channel there as well. Other than that, I'm on Facebook. I have my Facebook business page, my uh, private Facebook group for physicians. So just reach out to me, and I'm very easily accessible. You can also go on to Amazon, uh, Google my name, and you can see my 4 books there as well.
Definitely, I would recommend picking those out. I was browsing some of them, and I think I'm going to start with two. I found myself, and this is just like full disclosure,
Uh,
ordering a bunch of books and then planning to read them, and then I like want to have book overload. I'm going to do it one at a time in 2021. But guys, definitely pick some up because I think that you'll pick up some great gems.
Excellent.
Yes. Well, thank you for coming on our show today, and I'll give you an opportunity to say goodbye.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show, and I really enjoyed our time together. And may 2021 is just starting, so looking forward to 2021 being better than 2020.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening. And for all of you listeners out there, you can definitely click the subscribe button. If you have any comments or concerns, you can go on to Med School Coach and reach out to us, or go on my website at drerkeda.com and send some direct messages, and we can figure out what else you guys are inking to hear. Bye.
Thanks so much.